Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased for the first time to hear the members opposite talk about lowering taxes.
That's right.
In front of this House. First time in my hearing.
And Mark Carney just steps on a landmine. Mark Carney returned to question period today, where he was repeatedly battered by questions about the rise in steel and aluminum tariffs. No action on a deal, no pipelines, and no budget. His responses were telling, as he ended up making a fool of himself yet again, which may be a result of his national unity plan starting to unravel before our eyes. Let's take a look.
Oral questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Let's be clear, Trump's tariffs on Canada are wrong, unjustified, and attack on our workers and our economy. Now, while other countries have got deals to lower their tariffs, not only has the PM failed to do that, but he's got Canada's tariffs doubled on steel and aluminum. He promised he was the man with the plan. He can't even get a deal. Our workers are terrified about losing their jobs, and he promised that he'd collect $20 billion in retaliatory tariffs, but then secretly drop those tariffs to zero during the campaign. If he's so sure that he's still going to collect $20 billion, why not table a budget and prove it to Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
So this is a good opening salvo from Andrew Scheer. As we all know, yesterday Donald Trump signed the executive order to increase tariffs on aluminum and steel in Canada. Algoma Steel is obviously very concerned, so is Dofasco and others. Now, this is an indictment on Carney because the UK, like, we were the first country to have tariffs put on us. And it seems like we're going to be the last country to actually sign a deal with Donald Trump and the US to actually deal with them. So what's going on, Carney? You're the one said that you were the man with the plan. You were the guy that was best positioned and had the most experience to deal with Donald Trump. You've dealt with him in the past. Where's the deal?
Mr. Speaker, the American tariffs, the new tariffs on steel and aluminum, are unlawful, unjustified, and illogical. I agree with the member. And that is why, one of the reasons why we have retaliatory tariffs on over $90 billion worth of U.S. goods. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and in parallel preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So you have tariffs on $90 billion of American goods, except they all have exemptions. What's the point? Literally, what's the point? That's like, again, that's like saying somebody comes into your store and you say, hey, everything costs $1,000. Oh, well, then I'm done here. Oh, well, but don't worry. We have 100% off all the products in the store. So everything's free? Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's what our sale does. Okay, so I won't even check out. I'll just take all of your stuff and leave. This is what Andrew Scheer is calling out. Where is the plan? Like, oh, well, we're intensive in negotiations. Well, your first act as Prime Minister wasn't to go down and talk to the Americans. It was to go to Europe. And now we know why you went to Europe. You wanted to ask King Charles to come over and give your throne speech. That's why you went to Europe. Like, give me a break.
Well, one way to deal with the Americans is from a position of strength. But now the Prime Minister is saying that he won't even approve a new pipeline unless there is consensus. This is already unraveling. The radical BC Premier says no pipeline through his province. And there's not even consensus in the Liberal cabinet, with top ministers committed to killing oil and gas projects. The vast majority of Canadians don't want to give a veto to politicians. They want to be less dependent on the Americans and to earn more powerful paychecks from selling our oil and gas around the world. Will the Prime Minister show some leadership and commit to approving a pipeline today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians from Shawinigan to Saskatoon and the premiers and Prime Minister that represent them have agreed on the importance of building projects of national interest.
Right.
The consensus that's required includes a consensus with Indigenous peoples, something that the members opposite do not have. We will stand with Indigenous Canadians. We will build pipelines, energy infrastructure in the future of this great country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he's not denying that David Eby said, I'm not letting a pipeline come through British Columbia. Never mind the fact, folks, that he doesn't have any ground to stand on when it comes to that. The federal government can say, that's great, this is federal jurisdiction, out of the way. They can do that. And when he says, well, we need consensus from Indigenous, communities, sure, that's fine. And Pierre Poilievre even included that in his proposal. And he was even trying to get that consensus by saying, hey, certain portion of the revenue that we make from pipelines and all of the minerals that we're extracting, certain portion of that revenue will go directly to your community. That's an offer you can't refuse if you're an Indigenous community. And it creates jobs and it creates infrastructure and all of this stuff. So for Mark Carney to say, well, there's consensus, from Canadians all around, but we need consensus from Indigenous communities. The Conservatives don't understand that, and we are going to build pipelines. Okay, so this is the first time everyone's hearing about this. Did you just shoot your mouth off, or do you actually mean it?
If photo ops and phony rhetoric actually got things done in this country, then Justin Trudeau would still be Prime Minister. In all seriousness, the Liberals' $500 billion in new spending without a budget will make inflation worse. The PM said that he wants to be judged by prices at the grocery store. So let's look at those prices. The verdict is in. Beef up 34%, apples up 18%, coffee up 9%. Will the Prime Minister listen to Parliament and table a budget that controls spending, lowers taxes, and cuts inflation so Canadians can afford to put food on the table?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Excellent little dig at Mark Carney there, by way of taking a dig at Justin Trudeau. And he's right. He's absolutely right. The amount of photo ops that Justin Trudeau did, Canada would be the most prosperous and greatest country in the world if you judged him based on how many photo ops that he did and how much gaslighting that he did. But this is the thing with Carney. For a man who seems to hate oil and gas, there sure seems to be a lot of gaslighting coming out of his mouth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased for the first time to hear the members opposite talk about lowering taxes.
That's right.
In front of this House. First time in my hearing. Mr. Speaker.
And Mark Carney just steps on a landmine. And here's the thing about Mark Carney. You can tell that he's breaking one of the most important rules when you're standing up in the House, is you are supposed to ignore the heckling. Supposed to ignore it. And this is what Justin Trudeau had a very hard time of doing as well, because he would start his answer and then he would devolve into, just stuttering. So the fact that Mark Carney is actually responding to the heckles mid-statement, that shows that he's listening to what they're saying. And for him to stand up and say, well, this is the first time the Conservatives are talking about lowering taxes. Hello, McFly, have you been paying attention to what the Conservatives have been talking about for the last 3 years? 3 years. Lowering the carbon tax, cutting the taxes for middle class, lowering housing tax. It's like, come on. 2 days in a row, you make yourself look like a complete fool.
The Honourable Member for Middlesex, London.
Trump's
50% tariffs on steel and aluminum are wrong and an unjustified attack on our Canadian economy. This means that manufacturers in Middlesex, London are cutting shifts, delaying investment, and relocating to the U.S. These tariffs are a direct threat to Canadian jobs and our economic sovereignty. He promised Canadians he would defend us. He said he had a plan. But in responding to the U.S., this Prime Minister's elbows have gone limp. So I asked the Prime Minister, was the entire Liberal campaign just theatre?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, I would agree with the colleague. It's wrong. It's very wrong. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we had one of our colleagues in Washington yesterday to fight for Canadians, to fight for our workers, to fight for our industry. This is not theater. This is action, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we know what makes a difference is to fight, to protect our workers, to protect our industry, and to build this Canada with Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian workers. Mr. Speaker, we're going to build Canada strong together.
I love that the Conservatives are starting to call this out, because this is what a lot of us and a lot of you were calling out during the campaign as well, that all of this is just going to go away. All of this is just one big show to scare the crap out of Canadians in order to vote for them. So I'm glad they're calling this out, because this is what needs to get out there. Canadians need to see, the swing voters, not the hardcore far left liberals, the swing voters. They need to see that you were sold snake oil, as we said yesterday. Snake oil. The guy who said he was going to come in and fix the problem, the guy who said, I'm here because Canada's in a crisis. Where's the fix? If you're so good at making deals, how did the UK deal with this before we did? How is that possible? We have the man. He understands how the world works. He was telling us, I don't know how many times. He doesn't even seem to understand how Parliament works. And he certainly doesn't seem to understand how Donald Trump works, because we're getting more tariffs. Great job, Carney.
More photo ops. They need somebody to fight for them and actually get results. During the campaign, Trump actually endorsed the Liberal Prime Minister, and it's no wonder why. The Prime Minister said his government would collect $20 billion from U.S. tariffs. That was his big talking point. But when the pressure came, he went to his friend Trump and quietly dropped all those tariffs, leaving our steel and aluminum workers blindsided and betrayed. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Liberals listen to Parliament, be transparent, and table a budget so that Canadians can see how much, if anything, was ever collected from the so-called elbows up tariffs?
She nailed it, man. She nailed it. You have to demonstrate to Canadians, if you're being so tough, how much have you collected? And Donald Trump endorsing Mark Carney on the campaign, when all of the media, all of them, not the independent media, but the legacy media, all of them, all they were saying was, oh, Pierre Poilievre is just like Trump. He's Trumpian, and blah, 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 blah. Even to the point where Pierre Poilievre had that rally in front of his plane, and then all you saw was the legacy media saying, oh, look, Trump did the same thing. And then 2 days later, Carney did the same thing. Crickets. So what do we have here, Mr. Carney? Because it sure doesn't seem like action. It sure doesn't seem like urgency. Sure doesn't seem like anything that you talked about during the campaign. And in terms of your body language and how you're actually acting in question period, you seem to think that this is some big joke, because you're laughing and you're making jokes while people are asking you about some very serious things, and you're just passing it off like it's, some big amusement park ride. Well, this isn't an amusement park ride. This is Canadian Parliament, and Canadians expect results. And you can't just say, oh yeah, we're going to do all this stuff and not deliver and not expect consequences.
Mr. Speaker, instead of talking down Canada, she should be elbow up with us, Mr. Speaker. This is about making sure that as a chamber, this House should stand united, Mr. Speaker. This is about our nation. nation. We're fighting a trade war. Everyone in this house have a responsibility to fight for Canadian workers, fight for Canadian industry, to build Canada strong. Mr. Speaker, we get it on this side of the house. I hope on the other side they get it because Canadians get it at home.
So to translate what the Chihuahua was saying right there is, well, we don't like that you're calling out all of our missteps, and we don't like that you're calling out all of our gaslighting and our lies, so therefore we're just going to say that you shouldn't be talking down Canada, and if you disagree with us at all, that means you're unpatriotic and you're talking down Canadians. That's what he's trying to say there.
For left-wing.
The Prime Minister said there would only be pipelines if there was consensus. As it turns out, BC's Premier has said no. Several Liberal MPs are opposed, and even within the Prime Minister's own head there seems to be opposition, because on the one hand he says, yes, we're going to go ahead and become the energy superpower, and on the other hand he says, no, oil needs to stay in the ground. The Prime Minister clearly has no plan to get things done, so why is he putting his elbows down and making us beholden to the United States of America?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, what we saw on Monday were 13 provinces and territories working together to build the strongest economy in the G7. The premiers and the government are focused on building a strong Canadian economy. What we see from my colleagues across the floor are attempts to divide and to block development. I hope Conservatives will join with us in building a strong Canada.
So great question by Rachel Thomas, and a ridiculous, response by the Liberals. Now, for those wondering what's going on, I mentioned it before, the Conservatives have mentioned it a couple times. David Eby actually did come out and say that he is not going to be supporting any type of pipeline through British Columbia. Take a look. Eby says he won't be changing his mind on another BC pipeline, rebuffing Ford. BC Premier David Eby says he won't be throwing his support behind a new oil pipeline through the province, dismissing Ontario Premier Doug Ford's suggestion that Eby would change his mind. Eby says in response to Ford's remarks on Monday that the publicly owned TMX pipeline is already running through BC and the province doesn't support lifting the ban on oil tankers off British Columbia's northern coast. He says it's not his job to tell Ford it's quote-unquote extremely unlikely there will be a tunnel under Toronto's Highway 401, or tell Alberta Premier Smith that her quote-unquote vision for a pipeline connecting Alberta and northern BC is quote-unquote many, many years off with no proponent in sight. Eby says his job instead is to protect the interests of British Columbia by bringing forward quote-unquote shovel-ready projects. Ford had said, heading into a meeting between premiers and Prime Minister Mark Carney, that he was confident Eby and Carney would quote-unquote work things out regarding a second pipeline. Well, this kind of flies in the face of everything that Mark Carney was trying to say about that meeting on Monday. Oh, we had agreement from everyone. Everyone's on the same page. Except Mr. Eby. Now, he doesn't have to provide his agreement because the federal government can just say, sorry, this is federal jurisdiction, and acquire the land and put a pipeline all the way through BC to the coast. They can do that. But according to Carney, he's not going to do that unless there's consensus. So that's a problem, isn't it? And then it becomes a problem when we actually need to build up this economy. We need to make ourselves a quote-unquote an energy superpower. We need to make quote-unquote Canada strong. So this is already starting to unravel, not even a couple days after this premier's meeting. So Carney, what are you going to do here?